So we've all seen deepfakes, right? Those videos that can swap one person's face onto another's, and it looks weirdly real. But what if the technology could go deeper? What if it could simulate not just a face, but a person's actual mind? Well, that's the world we're stepping into, a world of what researchers are starting to call digital duplicates. And look, this is not science fiction. This quote is about the parents of Joaquin Oliver, one of the students killed in the Parkland shooting. They worked with an organization to create an AI simulation of their son, partly to advocate for gun control, but also for something so deeply personal, just to hear his voice again. This one sentence just captures the huge emotional and ethical weight of what we're about to unpack. You know, a story like that just forces you to confront the central question here. When we do this, when we recreate the dead, are we giving a voice back to the voiceless? Or are we crossing a line that we shouldn't? That's the tension at the very heart of this new technology. To even begin to answer that, we really need to get on the same page. So let's dive into our first section here, beyond deepfakes. What exactly are these digital duplicates? Okay, so here's the core definition. A digital duplicate, or a DD, isn't just a digital puppet. It's an AI model built to emulate a real person on a much, much deeper level. We're talking about trying to reproduce their psychology, their values, their beliefs. The whole point is to simulate how they might think and communicate, not just what they look or sound like. And this is where it gets really clear. A deepfake, that just copies sensory data, a face, a voice. An avatar, like in a video game, well, that's just you controlling it directly. But a digital duplicate is a whole different beast. It's trying to simulate a mind, to act with some level of autonomy based on the person it's modeled on. So the crucial thing to get here is that this is a huge leap from simple imitation to actual emulation. But of course, a leap like that, from imitation to emulation, comes with a lot of uncertainty, which brings us right to our second section, the promise and the peril. Because this technology has absolutely immense potential, but it's also loaded with some very significant risks. I mean, on the one hand, the promise is just incredible. Imagine the comfort someone could get from grief support that uses a simulation of a loved one. Or think about a DD helping doctors understand the wishes of a patient who can no longer communicate. We could interact with historical figures, or even have our own DD continue our life's work after we're gone. The potential here is, well, it's vast, and it's deeply human. But every single one of those promises has a shadow. I mean, to create a DID, you need massive amounts of personal data. That's a huge privacy risk. They could easily be used to misrepresent people, to manipulate and deceive. And what happens to real human relationships when we can just talk to a simulation instead? And maybe the scariest question of all, who's responsible when a DD does something harmful? Or when it starts to literally change our collective memory of a person or an event? And this table does a brilliant job of showing just how big and complicated this whole thing is. This is not a one-size-fits-all problem. I mean, look at the columns. The ethics of making a DD of a historical figure like Henry Ford are completely different than for someone who died recently or for someone who's still alive. And then look at the rows. The rules change again if you're talking about a public figure versus a private citizen. Every single one of these boxes has its own unique mix of that promise and peril we were just talking about. So, with all this complexity, how do we even begin to move forward? How do we get the good stuff while protecting ourselves from the bad? Well, in our third section, we're going to look at a pioneering attempt by an international group of experts to answer that. They've proposed a framework for the future, a way to navigate this completely new reality. The solution they've proposed is a really smart two-tiered ethical framework. Step 1 is the big picture, the main rule, harm mitigation and proportionality. It boils down to one simple but really powerful question. Do the benefits of making this specific ADD actually outweigh the risks we can see coming? It's like a fundamental gut check on whether we should even start. And if the answer is yes, well then step 2 gives us the tools to do it the right way. The first of these tools, this first supporting value, is information permission. And really, this is all about consent. It means that to prevent exploitation, the person being duplicated, or their family if they're gone, has to have control over how their data is used and what the final product looks and sounds like. It's about respecting a person's fundamental right to their own identity. The second value is transparency. This one's pretty simple. Anyone who interacts with a DD needs to know that it's an AI, but it's more than that. They should also understand its limits and basically how it was built. This is absolutely crucial to prevent people from being deceived or manipulated. Third, we have authenticity. This principle is all about pushing back against the idea of replacing people in situations where a real, genuine human connection is morally essential. So, for example, you probably shouldn't send your DD to comfort a grieving friend, right? This value protects the unique importance of that real person-to-person connection. And the final supporting value is called barriers to access. A DD that's designed for one thing could be incredibly harmful if it's used for something else. I mean, just imagine a grief bot being repurposed to harass someone. This principle says we have to build in safeguards to control who can use a DD and what they can use it for. It's about preventing that kind of misuse. Okay, so that's the framework. It sounds good in theory, right? But how does it actually hold up in the real world? In our fourth section, let's put it to the test and see how these principles apply to a real case study. So the case is a chatbot of Henry Ford. It was marketed as an educational app for kids. But here's the problem. The chatbot was programmed with guardrails that made it basically downplay or even deny Ford's well-documented and pretty extreme anti-Semitism. It was, in effect, whitewashing history. Okay, now let's apply our framework. As you can see, transparency and barriers to access are checked off as absolutely crucial here. By hiding a key part of who Ford was, the DED completely fails on transparency and just becomes a tool for misinformation. And without the right barriers to access, an unsupervised kid could easily walk away with a totally skewed view of history. But look what's crossed out. Information permission? Impossible to get and frankly less critical for a long-dead public figure. And authenticity? Not the main worry, since we can't talk to the real Henry Ford anyway. See how the framework works? It helps us figure out what matters most in any specific case.
So, we've seen how this framework can help us make sense of these really complex situations. And that brings us to our final section, where we're going to bring this whole conversation from the abstract and the historical right back to the personal, back to you and to your digital legacy.
We've explored the tech, the ethics, the potential rules, but at the end of the day, this technology is about people. It's about how we remember, how we connect, and what we decide to leave behind. So the final question here isn't for the tech giants or the philosophers, it's for you. If a digital version of you could one day speak for you, what would you want it to say?